What if the girl everyone overlooked was the one who would change the world? In a dusty Kansas town, a young girl bakes cakes by day and studies the secrets of the universe by night. She's mocked, ignored, and counted out, until one day her name is broadcast around the world as the winner of the World Physics Olympiad. This is not just a story about science. It's about grit, silence, and a light that refused to stay hidden. You're about to hear the emotional and inspiring story of the girl who baked light into the sky, a tale that might just shift how you see potential, poverty, and the quiet power of determination. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. And when you reach the end, tell us in the comments, what part of Zariah's journey moved you the most? Now settle in. This is one story you won't forget. In the quiet fields of Kansas, where the scent of fresh cakes floats from a humble bakery, a young girl named Zariah spends her afternoons helping her mother make ends meet. Mocked by classmates and overlooked by the world, she hides a secret life, one fueled by an unshakable curiosity and a mind built for the stars. By day, she sells pastries on street corners. By night, she dives into the mysteries of physics, teaching herself the language of the universe in silence and solitude. No one sees her coming, until the day her name echoes across the world as the unthinkable happens. The girl who baked light into the sky is a powerful tale of brilliance born in the shadows, of dreams needed between struggle and stardust. It's about rising above what the world expects and becoming the voice no one thought to listen for. Let the story unfold and witness how a quiet girl from Kansas lit up the sky. Disclaimer: the story you are about to hear is a work of fiction. All characters, events, places, and situations are entirely imaginary and created for storytelling purposes. This narrative is designed to inspire, motivate, and provide moral lessons that reflect the strength of the human spirit, the value of perseverance, and the power of believing in oneself. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or real-life events is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised for those seeking factual or biographical content. This story is meant for educational and inspirational purposes only. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon danced through the cracked windows of the Brooks kitchen, mingling with the cool Kansas breeze that slipped beneath the back door. It was late afternoon in Wichita, and the sunlight slanted in like honey, glazing everything in gold. Outside, the wind stirred the dust on the porch steps. Inside, 13-year-old Zariah Brooks was measuring sugar with the same precision a scientist might use for measuring gunpowder. Her fingers were quick but careful. Her sleeves were rolled up past her elbows, and a white apron clung to her waist, dusted with flour like snow on a rooftop. The beat of the mixer hummed behind her. Her mother, Miss Lena, was frosting cupcakes at the table, her lips moving softly to the rhythm of an old gospel song on the radio. "You finished that last batch, baby?" her mother asked without looking up. "Just slid it in the oven," Zariah replied, wiping her hands on a towel. "Timer's set for 22 minutes. Miss Lena nodded, spreading thick buttercream over the last red velvet cupcake with the ease of someone who'd done it for decades. Her hands were worn but sure, shaped by years of early mornings and late nights baking, selling, surviving. She glanced over at her daughter with a faint smile. "You're getting faster." Zariah allowed herself a smile, small and brief. She liked being fast. She liked being good. But more than anything, she liked the quiet feeling that came with getting things right. By 4 o'clock, the cart was packed. 3 trays of pound cake, rows of cupcakes in plastic containers, and 2 mason jars filled with lemon bars. The cart wobbled slightly as they rolled it down the front steps. Zariah steadied it with her left hand and wiped her brow with the other. The Kansas sun, though soft in color, still pressed its heat onto their shoulders. They headed toward the community center first. That was where the regulars gathered, older folks who knew Miss Lena's cakes were better than anything at the grocery store, and who always asked Zariah how school was going. She'd smile politely and say, "It's all right," even though most days it wasn't. At school, Zariah was invisible when she wanted to be. When she didn't, she was something worse. "She smelled like sugar again," one girl sneered last week, just loud enough for Zariah to hear. "What'd she do, bathe in cake batter?" Another boy muttered under his breath, "Yo, she workin' at the bakery or beggin' on corners?" They laughed. She didn't. Zariah had learned how to quiet her face, how to let their words bounce off her bones. She couldn't afford to get angry. That would only make her more of a target. Besides, anger took energy. She needed hers for something else. Once their regular route was done, Miss Lena sent her daughter to drop off 2 cupcake boxes at the hair salon a few blocks away. Zariah walked quickly, hugging the boxes to her chest. She could hear the high schoolers behind her on the sidewalk. "Hey, cake girl," one of them shouted. "Save me a piece next time, all right? Not one you stepped on, though." Zariah didn't stop. She kept walking, her shoes scraping against the sidewalk. Back home, after the money was counted and the cart was stored in the garage, Miss Lena heated leftovers for dinner. Zariah excused herself early. She always said she had reading to do, which was true. But what she didn't say was what she was reading. In her small bedroom upstairs, Zariah sat at her desk beside the window, a broken street lamp flickering outside. Her bed was tidy, her books arranged in a stack that didn't belong to her school's curriculum. Newton's laws, thermodynamics, quantum particles. The physics textbook she'd borrowed from the city library rested open on her lap. It was thick, dense, and smelled faintly of mildew. But it was hers for now. And for the next 2 hours she was no longer the cake girl. She was something else entirely. She was the girl who understood why the stars didn't fall, why light bent in glass, why airplanes could fly. She scribbled equations in a notebook she kept hidden beneath her mattress. Some were messy, others precise. Each one held a tiny spark of defiance. At exactly 10:03 she closed the book. She didn't need to set an alarm. Her body knew it was time. She slid the notebook back under the mattress, tucked the physics book under her bed, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Outside, the Kansas wind had calmed, but the air still held a hum, like something waiting to be born. And in the dark, Zariah's mind kept spinning, faster than mixers, faster than laughter, faster than anyone could see. She was building something. Quietly, patiently, light. And the sky had no idea what was coming. Monday mornings at Roosevelt Middle School always smelled like stale glue sticks and old carpet. The fluorescent lights in the hallways flickered just enough to irritate the senses, but not enough for the maintenance crew to bother fixing them. Zariah stood in front of her locker, twisting the dial with fingers still slightly sticky from Sunday's caramel glaze. She kept her head low, her shoulders hunched forward just enough to shrink her presence. Her locker was lined with plain black paper. No photos, no stickers, no notes. Just a small hand-drawn diagram of the solar system, taped in the back like a secret shrine. Her science teacher, Mr. Addington, passed by. He was a pale, wiry man with crooked glasses and a constant smell of peppermint. He nodded toward her, muttering something close to a greeting, though his eyes flicked past her before she could respond. That was fine. Being overlooked was better than being mocked. The first period dragged on. English class. They were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and the teacher kept using words like timeless and universal, as if every student in the room had the luxury of innocence. At lunch, Zariah sat alone under the staircase near the East Wing exit. It was quieter there. The cafeteria was too loud, too filled with jabs she couldn't block and laughter she wasn't part of. She pulled out a peanut butter sandwich in her worn notebook, flipping to the page she'd worked on the night before. The equation stared back at her like a riddle begging to be solved. Kinetic energy. Massachusetts velocity squared. She could almost feel the formula pulsing with potential. What you doing? Homework for college already? Zariah flinched. It was Bryn. One of the girls who always had her hair in tight braids with glossy beads that clicked when she walked. She wasn't cruel exactly, but she liked to laugh, and Zariah had long since learned that laughter often came at someone else's expense. No, Zariah mumbled, folding the notebook closed. You always got some secret thing going on? Like you scared to be normal, Bryn said, her tone light, but her eyes watchful. Zariah didn't answer. When Bryn walked away, her beads echoing like applause in a lonely room, Zariah slowly opened her notebook again. Her sandwich lay untouched. She preferred numbers. They didn't lie. They didn't giggle when you passed by. They didn't care if your backpack smelled like icing or if your shoes had flour in the laces. After school, Miss Lena was already waiting out front in their rusted blue station wagon, the same one her daddy used to drive before he got sick. They didn't talk much on the way home. The city passed them by in a blur of dull brick buildings and chain-link fences. That afternoon, Zariah helped frost cakes in silence. Miss Lena was focused on the upcoming church bake sale, already worried about whether they'd have enough vanilla extract to get through the week. Zariah nodded when spoken to, but her mind was elsewhere. That evening, after they finished selling to the usual crowd outside the post office, Zariah asked a question she hadn't dared before. Mama, can I stay late at the community center tonight? They got computers. Miss Lena looked up, surprise flickering across her tired face. You got homework? Yeah, a project. I want to look something up. Miss Lena hesitated, then nodded. Don't stay past 7, hear me? And you walk straight home. Zariah promised, already halfway out the door. The community center sat 2 blocks away, wedged between a laundromat and an abandoned hardware store. It wasn't much, a squat brick building with chipping paint and a front door that squealed like a cat every time it opened, but to Zariah, it was magic. The Wi-Fi was slow, but it was free. The desktops were old, but they ran the simulations she needed. That night, she clicked through physics forums and scanned PDFs of graduate papers. She paused only to scribble notes, absorbing everything like a sponge dropped into the sea. At precisely 6:59, she shut the computer down and gathered her things. As she stepped into the night air, the sky stretched wide above her, deep and blue and heavy with stars. She looked up, and for a second it felt like they were staring back. When she got home, her mother was asleep on the couch, an apron still tied at her waist. The television was still on, playing the end of a game show neither of them followed. Zariah tiptoed past, climbed the stairs, and pulled her notebook from under the bed. Before she began writing, she turned to the cleanest page she had left. At the top, in neat block letters, she wrote, "Goal, World Physics Olympiad, entry deadline, March 15th. She underlined it twice. Then, in smaller letters beneath, "Find out how to qualify." She stared at those words a long time. A knock sounded at the door. Her mama's voice, soft and groggy. "You still up, baby?" Zariah hurriedly closed the notebook. "Just finishing my reading." "All right. Don't stay up too late." Zariah waited until the footsteps faded. Then she pulled the notebook back into her lap and picked up her pencil again. Outside, the wind whispered against the window pane. And inside, Zariah began to trace the shape of her future in graphite and grit. The first flyer appeared on a corkboard near the science wing, stapled at an angle and nearly covered by an ad for dance team auditions. It was white with black lettering and a gold seal printed in the corner. Most students ignored it, but Zariah stopped in her tracks. Statewide Physics Olympiad qualifier, applications open now. Her breath caught. She leaned in, reading every line twice. The competition was just over a month away. The top student from each district would be invited to compete in Topeka. Winners from that round would move on to national qualifiers. From there, the best would earn a place in the World Physics Olympiad. Zariah's fingers brushed the edge of the flyer. It felt unreal, like something that belonged in a movie, not pinned to a grimy school wall in Wichita. But it was real. The next day, she found herself in the front office during lunch, standing awkwardly in front of Mrs. Delaney's desk. The secretary was eating baby carrots from a plastic bag and scrolling on her phone with her pinky finger. "I'd like to sign up for the Physics Olympiad," Zariah said, her voice small but clear. Mrs. Delaney blinked at her. You're in Mr. Addington's class, right?" "Yes, ma'am." The woman looked her up and down, clearly surprised. "Well, all right. Let me get you the form. They're asking for 1 nominee per school. Mr. Addington usually makes the recommendation." Zariah nodded, keeping her face still. That afternoon, Mr. Addington looked more confused than pleased when she approached him after class. "You want to be considered for the Olympiad spot?" he asked, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Yes, sir." He scratched at his jaw. "It's a tough field, Zariah. Students from charter schools, private academies. They've been training for this sort of thing for years." "I've been training too," she said quietly. He gave her a skeptical glance. "I see. Well, I'll need to administer a qualifying exam to pick our school's nominee. You'll have to take it after school tomorrow. That's fair, isn't it?" "Yes, sir," she said. As she walked away, she heard him mutter something under his breath, something about wasting time. But she kept her chin up. She knew the material better than anyone. The pages of her notebook had become her secret weapon, her shield, her sword. That night, she told her mother she had to stay after school for a science quiz. Miss Lena, tying up boxes for the next day's orders, looked concerned. "You okay, baby? You don't usually stay late." "I'll be fine. I promise." Zariah arrived early to the exam room. Mr. Addington gave her a thin packet of papers and sat at the back with a mug of coffee, clearly not expecting much. The questions weren't easy. Some were brutal. But Zariah's pencil danced across the page like it was born to solve riddles. She didn't even pause on the final problem. She'd done it before. Last week, in fact, while reading about particle motion in non-inertial frames. When she finished, she slid the packet to the edge of the desk and stood quietly. Mr. Addington blinked in surprise. "You're done?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." "Well then." He took the test from her and flipped through it. His eyes widened. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, more to himself than to her, "Ha! The next morning, during third period, the principal made an announcement over the loudspeaker. Her voice crackled through the halls like thunder slipping through static. Congratulations to Zariah Brooks, our school's representative for the Kansas District Physics Olympiad. We wish her all the best. For a moment, the classroom froze. Zariah sat motionless at her desk. Her heart was racing, but her face was calm. Then the whisper started. Zariah? No way. Is that the cake girl? Yo, she must have cheated. Mr. Addington cleared his throat. She earned it, he said without looking at anyone. Her score was the highest I've seen in 15 years. The room fell silent. After class, Bryn walked up to her in the hallway. You really did that? She asked. Zariah nodded. Yeah. Bryn stared at her a second longer, then said, Damn. I mean, good for you. It wasn't praise exactly. But it wasn't a joke either. And that was something. Back at home, when Zariah told her mother, Miss Lena sat down hard on the edge of the couch. You mean to tell me, my baby girl gonna compete with all them rich school kids? Zariah smiled. Looks like it. Miss Lena wiped her hands on her apron and pulled her into a hug. I don't know how you learned all that, but God knows I'm proud of you. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet preparation. Zariah studied late into the night, refining her strategies, memorizing constants and running calculations in her head while helping frost cookies. The competition was in Topeka, in a grand auditorium Zariah had only seen once on TV. The school couldn't afford to send a chaperone, but Miss Lena borrowed a car from a church friend and drove her there herself, humming softly the whole way. When they arrived, Zariah stepped out wearing her best dress, clean, modest, and a little too short at the wrists. The other competitors wore blazers and polished shoes. Some had laptops and coaches. She had a pencil in her mind. She walked into that auditorium with her shoulders straight, her hands steady. She didn't just want to win. She wanted them to see. The competition hall in Topeka buzzed with low conversation and the nervous shuffling of polished shoes against tile. Long rows of folding tables stretched from wall to wall, each one draped with white cloth and adorned with small name cards. The scent of fresh paper and faint cologne lingered in the air, mixed with the quiet static of anticipation. Zariah stepped inside, clutching her registration folder to her chest. Her name was spelled correctly on the badge this time. That alone felt like a small miracle. She walked past clusters of students dressed like they belonged in a college catalog. Buttoned shirts, sleek ponytails, shiny pins from science camps Zariah had never heard of. They spoke in casual tones about things like frictionless spheres and gravitational constants. Their words flowed easily, but there was no warmth in them. She found her seat near the back, next to a boy with silver-rimmed glasses and a pocket calculator clipped to his jacket. He glanced at her once, then twice, then said nothing. Fine by her. She laid her pencils out in a neat line, inhaled deeply, and began to recite the equation for thermal expansion in her head to steady her breath. When the announcer finally took the stage, a hush fell over the auditorium. Welcome to the Kansas District Physics Olympiad, the voice echoed through the speakers. Today's test will cover a range of topics from classical mechanics to thermodynamics, with particular emphasis on applied problem solving. You will have 3 hours. Use your time wisely. Zariah's heart thudded once. Then she opened her test booklet. The problems weren't just equations, they were puzzles. Scenarios layered with extra data, trick questions designed to weed out guesswork. She took her time with each one, drawing diagrams in the margins, working backwards when she had to. A few rows ahead, someone tapped impatient fingers against the table. Behind her, a student muttered something under their breath and erased half a page. Zariah was calm. Her pencil moved steadily. Her lips mouthed silent numbers as her mind broke each problem into steps, just like she had taught herself night after night under a dim bulb. 3 hours passed like water over stone. When the time was called, she laid down her pencil and closed the booklet gently, as if it were a fragile thing that might shatter under careless hands. They were told to wait in the side hall while the judges tallied the scores. It was there, under dim sconces and beside vending machines humming like restless insects, that the whispers began. She doesn't look like she belongs here. Which school sent her? Isn't she the one from the bakery district? Zariah sat alone on a plastic bench, spine straight, eyes forward. She didn't respond. She didn't fidget. Instead, she ran simulations in her mind, tiny particle interactions and momentum shifts, the way force obeyed patterns even when people didn't. After nearly an hour, the judges returned. One of them, a tall man with an uneven mustache, held a small white envelope and stepped onto a makeshift podium. Thank you all for participating, he said with the same tone someone might use to open a meeting or dismiss a class. This year's competition was fierce, with many strong contenders. But one student, above all others, demonstrated a rare ability to combine accuracy with insight. Zariah didn't breathe. The man unfolded the slip of paper and read the name slowly, clearly, as if testing its shape in his mouth. Zariah Brooks. The hallway didn't go silent, it snapped. Heads turned. A few mouths dropped open. The boy with the calculator let out an audible scoff. Zariah stood. Her steps to the front felt like something out of someone else's dream. She was aware of the stares, of the rising tide of confusion and disbelief. But all she focused on was the feel of the ground beneath her feet. She reached the front and accepted the certificate with steady hands. The man gave her a curious look, like he couldn't quite place what he was seeing. You scored nearly full marks on the applied physics section. That's the highest in the district in 7 years. Thank you, she said, her voice even. As she walked back to her seat, someone called out from the side, trying to whisper but failing. She must have memorized the answers or something. No way she figured out number 11. That one was graduate level. Zariah kept walking. Miss Lena was waiting outside when she stepped into the cold afternoon air. She was leaning against the borrowed car, arms crossed, scarf pulled tight around her neck. The moment she saw her daughter's face, she stood upright. I won, Zariah said, holding up the certificate like it weighed more than gold. Miss Lena let out a breath that cracked halfway through and pulled her in. Lord have mercy. You did it? You really did it. They drove home in silence, neither of them trusting their words not to break under the weight of what had just happened. That night, Zariah sat at the kitchen table after dinner. The certificate was laid in front of her, and next to it was her notebook. She opened to a blank page and wrote 4 words at the top. Next, National Qualifier, Chicago. Underneath it, she added a date, then circled it 3 times. She had no idea how they would afford the trip. No plan for how to pay the entry fee or get a hotel. But she would figure it out. She always did. Because what she carried wasn't just a dream. It was a truth waiting to be proven again. And the world hadn't seen the full equation yet. The air in Wichita turned sharper as winter crept in, its breath curling at the edges of the windows in the Brooks kitchen. Zariah sat at the worn table every evening, flipping through physics prep books borrowed from the public library, while the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg danced from the oven. The cold could do what it wanted. She had her mind fixed on Chicago. It started with a letter, one that arrived in a plain envelope bearing a crisp logo and gold trim. Miss Lena read it 3 times before handing it to her daughter. Zariah read it once and whispered, I'm in. She was officially qualified for the National Physics Olympiad. But the joy was short-lived. Inside the envelope was a list of expenses, registration, travel, lodging. All neatly printed, each amount more impossible than the last. Miss Lena stood in the middle of the kitchen, one hand on her hip, the other rubbing her forehead. Lord knows I want to send you, baby. But this is more than our rent. Zariah nodded slowly. I know. She didn't cry. She didn't even frown. She just stood, went to her room and pulled out a fresh page from her notebook. At the top she wrote 1 word. Plan. That weekend, the bakery stand was fuller than ever. Miss Lena's red folding table nearly buckled under the weight of extra orders. They offered cinnamon apple crumble, pumpkin cream loaves, and Zariah's favorite, chocolate velvet with cherry glaze. Zariah stood behind the table in her old hoodie and apron, calling out flavors with the confidence of a street performer and the precision of a scientist. People noticed, more than ever before. Maybe it was her voice. Maybe it was something else. By the 3rd week, she had a white jar next to the cake samples with a handwritten label. Help Zariah get to nationals. Some people walked past it, but some didn't. A woman in a navy coat dropped a 20 and asked for nothing. A retired science teacher heard her story and shared it with her book club. A kind-faced bus driver bought 2 cakes every morning and told his entire route. Within days, local news caught wind of the story. A student from the working-class district had beat the odds and won a spot at nationals. A reporter from Channel 5 came with a cameraman and asked Zariah how she had learned so much. She answered with the same calm voice she used in front of test papers. I just kept trying. Over and over. The video went viral. When it aired, people across Kansas saw her not as a charity case, but as a symbol of grit wrapped in humility. Donations began to trickle into a community fund started by one of Miss Lena's old customers. Within a week, the total covered airfare, hotel, and registration. And just like that, Zariah had a ticket to Chicago. The plane ride was her first. She watched out the window in silence, taking in the clouds with awe she barely dared to show. Miss Lena sat beside her, fingers gripping the armrest like it might float away. They arrived to cold wind and buildings taller than anything Zariah had ever seen. The hotel lobby was made of glass and marble, a place that seemed built for people who'd never scraped a knee or clipped coupons. Still, she walked through it with her head held high. The competition was held at a university campus on the city's north side, in a hall lined with towering portraits of famous scientists and scholars. Zariah walked beneath those paintings feeling both invisible and defiant. They hadn't made room on the walls for girls like her. Not yet. Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere was far more intense than Topeka. Students from every corner of the country were there, some wearing jackets stitched with their school logos, others trailed by science coaches who whispered strategy like football plays. Zariah had her notebook and a pencil. She took her seat. The test was brutal. Where the district exam had been a mountain, this was a range of cliffs and shifting stones. Each problem was a maze of variables, disguised traps, and theoretical scenarios that twisted logic into knots. But Zariah had studied chaos. She understood how the universe curved. She knew the rules of entropy and the stubborn truth behind Newton's laws. Her mind moved like water, slipping past resistance, reforming when broken. She didn't look around, didn't pause. She simply solved. 3 hours later, she turned in her paper with quiet hands and left the hall like a shadow. No one stopped her. No one said a word. And that, in itself, was no surprise. But 2 days later, during the closing ceremony, everything changed. They held the awards in a grand ballroom. Glittering chandeliers. Rows of velvet chairs. The names of third and second place were called to polite applause. Then the final announcement came. And the first place winner of this year's National Physics Olympiad, representing Kansas, the announcer paused, eyebrows rising slightly, is Zariah Brooks. The room didn't erupt, it staggered. As if everyone collectively lost their breath for a moment. Miss Lena gasped loud enough for 3 rows to turn. Zariah remained seated for a second longer than she should have, her mind registering the words slower than usual. Then she stood. The walk to the stage was longer than in Topeka, and the stairs were sharper. She reached the front and took her medal. The announcer smiled, still baffled. "You've made history today, Miss Brooks," he said into the mic. "Kansas has never placed first. And you're the youngest competitor on record." Zariah didn't speak into the microphone. But when she turned to face the crowd, medal around her neck, she stood tall. Not for applause, but because she had earned the right to be seen. Back in the hotel room that night, Miss Lena tucked the medal back into its case and whispered, "The world's gonna have to make space for you now, baby." But Zariah just smiled and replied, "No. I'll make it myself." She opened her notebook and turned to the next blank page. The headline spread like fire across Kansas. Local girl wins National Physics Olympiad. From cakes to calculus, the Zariah Brooks story. Black excellence shines bright in Chicago. By morning, the bakery table outside the corner store was swarmed. Customers lined up before sunrise, some just to shake Zariah's hand, others asking for autographs on napkins. A few brought cameras, hoping for a picture with the girl who had turned the laws of physics into a kind of poetry. Zariah stood behind the table again, apron tied, smile polite, eyes calm. But inside her, the world was shifting. Universities began to call. Not high schools. Not local guidance counselors. Deans. Some from Kansas State. Some from MIT. Even a woman from a European institute wrote a letter with hand-inked cursive, saying she had seen Zariah's work and wanted her to consider a special program. And then came the invitation to the World Physics Olympiad, held in Geneva. Zariah read the email twice. Then she closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. What? The word echoed through her like a thunderclap. She had never been beyond Kansas, never stepped on international soil, never even been to the ocean. But Geneva, that was something else. That was a different sky, a place where nations collided in languages she'd only seen in books. That night she told her mother. Miss Lena dropped the spatula mid-stir and stared at her daughter with wet eyes and flour on her cheeks. "World?" she whispered. Zariah nodded. They sat down together, the noise of the oven ticking behind them. "Baby, I don't know how we'll do it, but we're going to get you there." This time the donations came faster. News outlets followed her every move. A national network sent a crew to Wichita to film a full documentary. They wanted to show the world how a girl who sold cakes on the sidewalk cracked the code of the universe. But not all the attention was sweet. At school, some of the students changed their tune. The same ones who had mocked her began calling her Einstein in braids, not always with admiration. Some gave her wide-eyed praise. Others gave her cold shoulders. In class, a teacher once asked Zariah if she was feeling pressured to act smart. That night, she went home, tore out a page from her notebook and wrote, "The weight of a crown is quiet but heavy." Despite it all, she kept working. Day after day. She built models in the garage using wires and light bulbs. She translated physics papers from French to English using a free browser tool, just to study from the source. By the time the date for Geneva approached, Zariah was ready. On the flight across the Atlantic, she stared out the window, watching stars peek through the clouds. Somewhere above the ocean, she whispered to herself, "This is the farthest any girl from my street has ever gone." Geneva greeted her with gray skies and glass buildings that mirrored mountains in the distance. The International Physics Camp was held in a circular institute with floors of labs, libraries, and lecture halls. Flags from 50 countries hung from the ceiling like stitched promises. Zariah wore a second-hand coat and carried a binder covered in stickers. She walked through the halls with quiet purpose, nodding at the other competitors, most of whom were older, wealthier, and trained in private academies. Still, when she sat down at her assigned station, her hands didn't shake. The problems were presented in stages, first theoretical, then experimental. Each student had to solve a complex quantum mechanics riddle and then design a physical model based on those solutions. Hours passed. Machines buzzed. Keyboards clacked. Zariah moved like water again. Silent, steady, focused. While others tangled in theoretical debates, she mapped out the design for a low-energy fusion model that used magnetic rings to simulate particle containment. Her equations were dense, her diagrams tight and clean. At the end of the test period, the judges collected the work without ceremony. The announcement would come in 3 days. During those days, Zariah explored Geneva with a chaperone and a worn notebook in her coat pocket. She saw lakes that looked like mirrors, ate bread she couldn't pronounce, and wandered past buildings older than the state of Kansas. On the third night, she stood in front of the auditorium again. It was grand and stone-walled, with translators speaking into tiny headsets and scholars in tailored suits sitting upright in rows. The host, a tall man with a Swiss accent and golden spectacles, stepped onto the stage. "This year's World Physics Olympiad brought together the brightest minds from across the globe," he said, his voice smooth as a cello. But one paper, one design, rose above all others. Not because it was perfect, but because it imagined a better question before finding an answer. Zariah's chest tightened. The man looked down at his card. This year's winner, representing the United States of America, Zariah Brooks. For a moment, the room was frozen, and then it erupted. Applause thundered across the stone walls. Zariah stood slowly. She walked to the stage in silence, her steps echoing louder than any sound before. The medal was heavy. As it was placed around her neck, she caught her reflection in a pane of polished glass. She didn't see a poor girl from Kansas. She didn't see a baker's helper. She saw a physicist. After the ceremony, an ambassador approached her and said, "You've inspired something much larger than science, Miss Brooks." She just nodded. She wasn't chasing inspiration. She was chasing light. The months after the World Physics Olympiad felt like the slow settling of sand after a storm. Zariah returned to Kansas, but the world around her had shifted. The skies were the same, the streets the same, and the people, while familiar, had grown quieter when they looked at her. Miss Lena tried to keep life as close to normal as possible, baking cakes in the early mornings and keeping the shop open through the afternoons. Zariah still helped, but she no longer stood at the corner alone. People waited in line for more than just pastries now. They waited to see her, to hear her speak, to witness the girl who had defied every expectation. The local news followed her everywhere, the cameras never far behind, until one morning, Zariah found herself on the front page of the Wichita Times with the headline, "Zariah Brooks, a girl who changed everything." At school, the changes were more subtle. She was no longer the quiet girl in the back row, scribbling notes in notebooks others never glanced at. Her teachers treated her with a mix of admiration and fear, unsure whether they should continue to push her to the same standards as everyone else or let her fly free. The students who once mocked her now asked for advice. They sent notes, left questions on her desk, and even offered her their homework assignments, hoping she'd show them the right way. Zariah didn't mind. She answered as honestly as she could. But what mattered most now wasn't the attention, the interviews, or the constant stream of questions. What mattered was the equation she had been solving since she was a child. The one that turned obstacles into opportunities, hardship into triumph, and silence into a voice heard far beyond Kansas. Her mind never stopped moving. New ideas came in waves. She began work on her own projects, developing theories about energy conservation and climate technology, seeking ways to apply quantum mechanics to environmental sustainability. She reached out to local engineers, mathematicians, and even scientists from nearby universities, pitching her ideas like seeds, hoping they would sprout. It wasn't long before one of those seeds grew. One evening, while eating dinner with Miss Lena at their small kitchen table, the phone rang. Zariah picked it up, instinctively knowing it was something big. "Hello," she said. "Is this Miss Zariah Brooks?" The voice was formal, a bit distant. "Yes, it is. This is Dr. Melinda Harris, head of the National Renewable Energy Institute. We've been following your work, and we would like to offer you an internship. We believe you could contribute significantly to some of our upcoming projects." Zariah's heart stilled, but only for a moment. "Is this a joke?" she asked. "No," Dr. Harris replied, laughter in her voice. "I assure you it's not. We've reviewed your designs and your theories. We want you to come work with us." For the second time in her life, Zariah felt her world tilt. But this time she wasn't afraid. She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "I'll come." The following weeks were a blur of paperwork, flight tickets, and meetings with the institute. Soon, Zariah found herself on a plane again, this time to California, where the institute was headquartered. Her mother came with her, hands nervously clutching the straps of her purse. When they arrived, Zariah was introduced to some of the brightest minds in renewable energy. They were eager to hear her ideas, eager to have her at the table. She spent her first days in meetings, taking notes, listening carefully, and offering suggestions that were, at first, met with polite curiosity. Then one day she presented a new concept, a hybrid solar panel design that could store energy in a more efficient way, using a combination of quantum dots and energy conversion layers. Her proposal was revolutionary. Within hours, they were discussing funding, patents, and the possibility of integrating her design into their next-generation solar panels. It was a moment of clarity. Zariah understood then that this was the beginning of something much larger than herself. Her work in California became the foundation of a project that would change the way the world thought about sustainable energy. As the months passed, she balanced her research with her studies. She became the youngest intern at the institute to co-author a published paper, and before long she was speaking at global environmental conferences, advocating for policies that would help integrate renewable technologies into developing countries. But even as the world called her a prodigy, a voice of hope, a new beacon for the future, Zariah always returned home, back to the bakery, back to the table with Miss Lena. They didn't need the spotlight to feel complete. One quiet evening, while Miss Lena worked on a batch of cake batter, Zariah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the world outside. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves. The small, quiet town of Wichita, Kansas, stretched out before her, but in her heart, the horizon had never felt so close. "Maybe it's time for a new dream, huh?" Miss Lena said, her voice filled with quiet wisdom. Zariah nodded, but her answer was more than words. "It's not about the dream anymore," she said softly, looking out at the stars above. "It's about the journey. It's about making sure that no matter where I go, I never forget where I started." And as the night settled in, the two of them sat there together, the weight of all that had been accomplished not in the medals or the headlines, but in the quiet moments shared between them, when all the world's expectations fell away. Because the most important equation had always been the one that brought them here. Heart plus grit plus hope equals possibility. And Zariah knew that no matter how far she traveled, she would always find her way back to this simple, sacred truth. The journey, she realized, had only just begun. The end. 7 moral lessons from The Girl Who Baked Light into the Sky. The power of persistence in the face of adversity. Zariah's story is a testament to the value of persistence, especially when faced with obstacles and mockery. Despite the mocking and underestimation from her classmates, Zariah never let those negative voices drown out her passion for learning. This lesson teaches us that no matter how difficult the journey may seem, persistence can transform any challenge into an opportunity for growth. When the world doubts you, believe in yourself and keep moving forward. Zariah's journey is a reminder that the road to success is often paved with obstacles, but it is persistence that will allow you to overcome them and shine in the end. Embrace your unique path. Zariah's upbringing in Kansas, where she helped her mother sell cakes, could have been seen as a hindrance to her success in the world of science. She was constantly reminded of her humble beginnings, but instead of viewing them as limitations, she embraced them. She used her experiences to fuel her ambition. The lesson here is about embracing your unique path, no matter where you start or what others expect of you. Your background doesn't define your potential. The journey you take, the struggles you face, and the ways in which you grow are the true markers of who you can become. Education is more than formal institutions. Zariah's education didn't come from the walls of prestigious institutions or private tutors, but from her relentless curiosity and the books she found in her spare time. This lesson teaches us that knowledge isn't confined to classrooms. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from self-study, from real-life experience, and from the world around you. Zariah's story encourages us to be lifelong learners and to seek knowledge wherever we can, regardless of the circumstances. The pursuit of knowledge is not a privilege but a right available to everyone, especially when passion and determination are involved. Support and community are key to success. While Zariah's success was a product of her hard work, it was also the result of a strong support system. Her mother, Miss Lena, always encouraged her daughter, even when Zariah herself didn't fully understand the magnitude of her potential. The community that rallied around her, from the bakery customers to the local media, showed that having a solid support network is crucial for achieving big dreams. This lesson highlights the importance of community and family, reminding us that the support we receive from those around us can help propel us forward when we feel like giving up. No one achieves greatness in isolation. Believe in yourself when no one else does. Throughout her journey, Zariah faced skepticism from her peers, teachers, and even some family members. They didn't initially understand her ambition or the scale of her dreams. But Zariah believed in herself. This lesson encourages us to believe in our abilities even when others don't. Confidence isn't built by external validation but by internal conviction. Zariah's ability to trust her own potential, even when the world doubted her, shows that true belief in yourself can carry you through even the toughest challenges. Failure is part of the journey to success. Zariah did not achieve instant success. Her first attempts at solving complex problems were filled with trial and error. She faced rejection, mockery, and moments of doubt. But these moments were necessary parts of her journey. This lesson reminds us that failure isn't something to fear, it's an essential step toward success. Failure doesn't define us, but how we respond to it does. Zariah's ability to learn from her mistakes, refine her work, and move forward with more determination is a reminder that failure is not the end of the road but merely a part of the process. You are never too young or too small to make a difference. Zariah's age was often seen as a limitation by others. She was young, from a small town, and had little formal training. Yet, she defied expectations and proved that age and status don't determine impact. The lesson here is that no matter your age, background, or current situation, you can make a difference in the world. Zariah's story teaches us that everyone has the potential to change the world around them, regardless of how others perceive them. You are never too small to aim for greatness, and your voice can carry further than you ever imagined. These moral lessons from Zariah's story encapsulate the universal truths that resonate with people of all ages and backgrounds. They emphasize the importance of perseverance, self-belief, and the power of education and support. Zariah's journey reminds us that the path to success is often not linear, but with courage, resilience, and a commitment to learning, we can achieve what once seemed impossible. Thank you for watching and listening to The Girl Who Baked Light into the Sky. Zariah's journey reminds us that even in the quietest corners of the world, greatness is rising. Sometimes unnoticed, sometimes uninvited, but always unstoppable. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think differently about what's possible, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your words matter. And if you want more stories that move the heart and awaken the mind, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the other stories waiting for you right here. Your support means everything. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and never underestimate the power of a quiet